Hello everyone, Katie Freeman here with Freeman Furnishings, and in today's video I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm going to talk about the story of these cedar wood bar stools. And what I mean by that is I'm going to tell you where that wood came from, as in what part of the country, why was the tree taken down, through their lumber milling process, all the way up until the point of where I obtained this wood. And then I'm going to dive into the design and build process for these stools. All right, so why don't we go ahead and jump right into the story. All right, so here we have an eastern red cedar, which grow pretty much everywhere in the state of Iowa. So that's what I'm working with. Now, while you're watching me break this piece down to start working on the bar stools, I'm just going to tell you the story on how I got the wood. So back in the late 80s, my father-in-law actually purchased a whole bunch of red cedar because he wanted to make a cedar chest for my mother-in-law. So how he came about the red cedar is he got it from a countryside local sawmill, and we don't really know for sure why the cedar tree was taken down, but probably the biggest reason cedar trees are taken down in Iowa is from cedar rust disease. So that's most likely what happened. So my father-in-law died in 2013, and then just last year my mother-in-law said, well, you know what, you're the only one in the family who does woodwork, who enjoys doing woodwork, so I think you should get the cedar. So I went ahead and got the cedar. It's all on my storage unit, quite a bit of it, and it's all beautiful, as you can see. All right, so you watch me break down the cedar. I basically, it's roughly 16 inches wide by 18 inches deep. That's what I was going for, but it's not exact. You know, each one of these are unique of their own, but that's the general outline I was going with. And then gluing up two pieces together, because this cedar was only 3/4 of an inch thick, and since I'm carving out the seats, I need more material than that to work with. So glued it up, and prepping it for glue. You also saw me use the hand plane, just trying to get it smooth enough to hopefully avoid any voids. Using my bandsaw to get the edges smooth as possible. Again, it's all relative. It doesn't have to be exact. That's why you don't see me taking any measurements or anything, but just getting it prepped to do some carving. So this time, usually I use the Arbortech turbo plane to do carving, but I've been seeing some stories on Instagram with these King Arthur Holy Galen discs for the angle grinder, and so I thought I'd give that a try, and I tell you what, I really enjoyed working with it. So this attachment, this Holy Galen one, is the medium grit, if you will, of the disc. They have a coarse one too, but if any of you work with red cedar, you already know that it's pretty soft. It's actually, to me, it feels very similar to work with as redwood, and it's kind of like if you look at it wrong or sneeze, you're going to dent it. So I just went with medium because I knew I didn't want to be overly aggressive and end up losing too much. And so doing that, there's lots of dust, and I figured, hey, why not? We're in Iowa. We usually have snow angels. Let's make some sawdust angels. It was a lot of fun, though I had fun getting sawdust out of every nook and cranny later on that night, but it was still a lot of fun. Okay, so if any of you work with cedar, or if not, it's a pretty knotty wood, which makes it really cool and interesting grain pattern to look at, but it also means that while you're carving, you're going to expose some voids in the wood. So I went ahead and decided to put some epoxy in it, and I also mixed in this like metallic silver paint just to see if I could get some contrast to what I knew the color was going to be that I was going to be dyeing it later on, which you'll see. So just kind of filling it up with this epoxy resin, all the voids on the seat of it. At this point, I've only done like kind of the rough shaping. So I know I'm gonna be doing some finishing, sanding, finishing, shaping. So I'm not too worried about having a little bit of a heavy hand with the resin. Mainly I just want to make sure that all the voids are fully filled. Alright, so then I'm taking a sanding disc on the angle grinder, trying to make quick work of getting rid of the epoxy that I don't need, getting it back down to the wood, and also kind of doing some finish, quasi-finish shaping of the seat. It's not going to be perfect yet by any means. This is my first time using a sanding disc on the angle grinder, so it's definitely a bit of a learning scale for sure. I like it because it's quick, but I think it can tend to be maybe a little aggressive, and since I really wanted to get some extra curvature in the seat, it was a little bit more difficult doing that, but I mean, I managed for sure. And then after I had sanded down, unfortunately I did not get the cedar as flat for glue up as I had hoped, and so as I kind of sanded and carved more away, there were a few gaps at the seams that did come through. So I'm just using some Gorilla Glue quick mix epoxy that again I added the paint to, and just to fill in those little areas, and really you don't notice it in the finished product at all, which was what I was going for. So then I moved on to my orbital sander, which is usually what I use a lot for finishing up my carving. I'm not sure what other makers use, but that's what I really like to use. And I went through all the way up to 220 grit, which gave it a really nice smooth feel. I always want to make sure that the pieces have the best tactile experience as possible, in addition to a visual experience. Alright, so before I put any of the dye on, I wanted to make sure that yes, these seats are super comfortable. And of course I did this actually quite a bit throughout the process, but this was just my final test. Sat it on my shop stool just to see you know, what the feel is like. I want to make sure that they don't just look good, but that they feel good, right, when you're sitting in them. Knowing that there was a certain color I was after, I had a bunch of the different folk art by Plaid Crafts dyes, which is usually just like, it's actually a fabric dye, but I like using it on wood. And I mixed it to get kind of this deeper reddish purple color. Really, I'm kind of calling it like a red wine color is what it reminds me of, to dye the wood. So I did both the front and the back, and surprisingly the epoxy that had the silver paint mixed in, well, once I put the dye on it, the dye actually kind of dyed that as well to like a real light lavender color, and I really like that contrast. It wasn't my original plan, but I like how it turned out for sure. And then I'm just putting on some spray lacquer, rust-oleum spray lacquer. This is the first time I'm using the rust-oleum kind. I usually use like the Minwax spray lacquer, but I really liked the rust-oleum. I was able basically just to do it one coat on each side, and it looks great, and it's very protected. And then I'm putting my brand here on both seats, the Freeman Furnishings brand. The braiding iron I got from Gearhart Industry. It's an electric brass brand. I really enjoy working with it. It makes quick work of adding your brand to your pieces, for sure. And then I used my Howard Feed and Wax to do a final kind of polish up coat on the top of the stools. So as you learned from the video, these cedar wood bar stools have a very personal connection to me, and I can't wait to see how their story ends. And hey, they're great for having a glass of wine. Alright, so if you enjoyed the story of these cedar wood bar stools and you would like to see the story of future projects to come, please subscribe to my YouTube channel down below. Or you can go to my website, www.freemanfurnishings.com, and there you will find Wood Stories blog, where I tell the story of not just these stools, but other past projects as well. Thanks for watching. Bye!